And welcome to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. It's an honor to be speaking with filmmaker Jody Eldred. Thanks for being with us today.
Pleasure to be here, Josh. Happy to be here.
Well, Jody, tell us about your background and how you got into the wonderful world of filmmaking.
Wonderful. Who says it's wonderful? Does it have to be wonderful? Can we use another adjective like horrible? No, I'm playing with you, of course. Well, there's times where it is horrible and times where it's glorious, and that's the nature of being in battle, which it certainly is. I say often, if you're going to be salt and light, then you need to be in a smelly and dark place, and that's certainly what Hollywood is. But I digress. Although it's really not a digression, because initially I really felt like the Lord was calling me into ministry. I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana. Best pie you'll find anywhere, by the way, in case you're looking for pie. And when I was in high school, I really felt very, very clearly that God was calling me into full-time ministry, which was, very pleasing to my mother, as you can imagine. I was already working in TV back then. The church that I was raised in was a very large Methodist church, and they were one of the early pioneers of being on TV, and I was a cameraman there. They used the local youth there in the church to do camera, and then I began directing the worship services. It was just single camera and then later two camera, and I had an aptitude for that. It kind of came naturally. It wasn't all that hard, and but I really still felt, and this was before TBN and PTL and CBN and all that jazz. We're talking late 60s. I'm almost 100 years old now, and I'm speaking metaphorically. And so I didn't have any concept of, Christian television or Christian films or anything like that. And we did a little TV program at our church, and one of the guys was a top 40 radio DJ there, and a strong Christian guy, and he kind of became a mentor of mine. And we were talking one day. And
what was his name, by the way?
His name was Ed Gowdy, Gouedy. Ed went to be with the Lord about 25 years ago. He had cancer. But he was one of the great influencers on me. And I was interested in scuba diving, and he was a diver. And he goes, well, I can teach you some basic stuff. And this church had a swimming pool, believe it or not. And I remember, I'll never forget this, one evening he was teaching me just basic, snorkeling type stuff, the first things you need to learn, and we were chatting after, and I had done this fun little kiddie TV program, which I directed with him, and he was asking me, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, I got a scholarship, a ministerial scholarship to go to college next year, and he said, well, you've got some aptitude here in this TV thing. Do you think God would want you to just throw that away to become a minister in the pulpit? And I had never given that a second thought. I'm like, if you're going to go into ministry, you have to be a minister, right? Mm-hmm. And that really changed my thinking. And actually, I was in college. It was my first year in college, so I was on that scholarship at that time. And so I really began thinking about that. And anyway, later I kind of determined that he was right. And so I got out of that program. He, on the other hand, got out of radio and became an ordained minister. So we kind of switched roles. It was kind of crazy. And I began working in television news at a TV station there, and then moved to another station. And I did that while I was in college. And I kind of did everything that I could do in a city of 200,000 people. I had been a reporter and a cameraman, and had done a little bit of on-air work, and I'd done some documentaries and commercials and a variety of things. And it really became apparent to me that God was saying, I have something more for you, and it's not here. So in about 1983, I went to a film directing workshop that was led by a guy named Robert Wise. And you may not recognize the name, but he's the guy who directed The Sound of Music, West Side Story, I Want to Live, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Haunting, just a litany of, some of the world's greatest pictures. Mm-hmm. He was very encouraging. And of the 30 or so people in my class, he, said, he really felt like I was perhaps the one with the most just natural talent. Those are his words, not mine. And so I was like, well, gosh, maybe I should pursue this. Maybe this is something that is inside of me that's kind of natural. My younger brother, is an artist, and he's always been able to draw. Mm-hmm. And he's an artist now. He's an illustrator and graphic artist, works for an ad agency. And he's a very gifted guy. I can't draw at all. I can't even draw a stick man. You would look at it and go, what is that? A stick man. I think, well, maybe a stick. But I've always had an ability to take pictures. I found a photo once of me when I was 3 years old sitting on a swing set at my grandfather's house, and I had his Brownie camera in my lap. I was like, wow, 3 years old. I was interested in that. So it's something that kind of came natural. I wasn't good at it naturally, but I worked at it. And so anyway, making a long story short, I ended up moving to Los Angeles from Shreveport at the end of 1983. So it's been almost 40 years now, and I've been here ever since. And I've done a variety of things in that time. I've done a lot of things to pay bills that maybe were not right on the course that God had set for me, because I thought I was going to come here and direct films and all this kind of stuff. And I really began getting a lot of work as a cameraman, because it was a lot of work, and it paid decently. So I still do that. 40 years later, I'm still shooting. But I've also directed thousands of hours of live TV, and I've directed some scripted stuff, and just had a big variety of projects over the years. And some of it is stuff that definitely, looking back and not very far back, are things that I was really doing to pay bills, and I wasn't trusting God for my provision. I was trusting myself and my own abilities. It's like, well, there's a lot of work as a cameraman. I can work for the news networks, which I did, for all of them, ABC, CBS, NBC, and even CNN before they went woke. And there's plenty of that, and I was good at it. But I really think that some of that kept me away from pursuing the things that He brought me out here to do, to be a storyteller. So that's a long story, but that's some.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I looked at your resume. You worked for KSLA-TV in Shreveport from 1976 to 78. I think that was a CBS affiliate, and you were there for about 2 years as a reporter and cameraman. And you did a lot of things. It said you were a cameraman for the affiliate. You also did reporting. Looking back on your on-air reporting, what's your memories of being on the air, in front of the camera? What did you like the experience? Was it okay? But I knew this was not my strong suit. How was that, by the way?
I think I was horrible at it. I did it because they needed me to. I was on 3 nights a week doing reporting stuff. I wasn't ever an anchor. I did this thing. It was my idea. I demanded it, that I do this little comedy commentary thing on this new afternoon show they did, and I'm so glad there was no record of that, because I was just terrified. I was shaking, and it was horrible on air. And I'm completely different now. I'm 100% different now. I've been on camera a million times and guests on shows and what have you, and I love it. And I speak to big groups, and the two main fears that most people have are, I think it's dentists and speaking in public. And I have no fear of either of those. My dentists are always friends of mine. And my wife, who would be terrified of speaking in public, she's like, that's oxygen to you. And I said, it really is. I mean, I love it and really enjoy it. And, the hundreds of times I've been on TV since, I was a guest on Good Morning America with Diane Sawyer live. Diane was a friend. It was super comfortable and easy, and I don't know what changed in me from those days back in Shreveport to now, or when that happened. Maybe it's something that God did in me, because He wanted me to be able to speak to people in groups and do presentations or be on TV or whatever it is, not as a TV personality, because I'm not that. I don't have that look. I don't have that voice, but I'm comfortable doing it, and I like it, because I think that God has something that He wants me to say. And back then, I was a 20-year-old, 21, 22, 23-year-old just starting out, and I didn't know who I was or what God wanted to do with me exactly, just struggling along. And I was much, much better behind the camera and sitting in the control room than I ever was on camera. I do have a few of those reports that I did that I've saved on 3/4-inch tape, and no one will ever see them.
Unless somebody from Obsolete Video has them. I don't know if you've heard that YouTube page, but they're mostly LA, Los Angeles area TV stations. They have video of from like the 70s and 80s, which is really cool just to see stuff I grew up with and stuff I don't even remember.
I would love it.
And it's on YouTube, but I don't think they have anything from the Shreveport market, at least that we know of.
Let's pray that's not.
You were also at KTBS-TV in Shreveport. Was that the PBS affiliate? Because it said that you did a documentary there called The China Experience Beyond the Wall.
Yeah, KTBS was an ABC affiliate. I had been at KSLA for about a year and a half, and then KTBS got a new news director who was really changing the market there, and he hired me away to come over as a cameraman and reporter, and his name's Dave Goldberg. He actually ended up being news director at KTLA here in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Well, he's a real fire starter. He had worked in Dallas and Houston, and just exceptional news director. Had been a cameraman, chief cameraman at WFAA, ABC's flagship station in Dallas. And so Dave hired me away, and he really became a mentor as well. We're still friends. But while I was there, I'm trying to think if I did that documentary while I was there. I believe I was still there when I did that documentary, and then it aired on PBS in Louisiana. And the reporter on that was, and still is, my best friend, Rick Rowe, who's a reporter and photographer and editor, cameraman, at KTBS. And so he and I went to China with this college choir, and it was in the early days of people going to China. I think it was in 81 or something. Mm. And there weren't a lot of Americans who had been there, and so we were kind of looked at as strangers. In fact, I'm looking right now at a photo in my office of me and Rick in Shanghai, and we're standing there, a camera on my shoulder, and we're surrounded by a group of Chinese who are staring at us like we are men from outer space, because a lot of them had never seen Westerners before. Such a crazy thing. But that project turned out good, and I when I moved to LA the next year, or a couple of years later, I guess, I entered it. I had just become a member of the Directors Guild of America. I was directing a kind of an Entertainment Tonight type show at ABC. Mm-hmm. And so they had the DGA awards, and they have awards for documentaries and sitcoms and movies and all this sort of stuff. So I just kind of on a whim entered that documentary into the competition, and ended up being one of 3 directors who got nominated as Best Director of a Documentary. And that was when I first moved here. And that was really a God thing, because I'm not quite sure how many members of the DGA had even seen it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it had a catchy title, I don't know. But that really was a huge help for me, because it helped put me on the radar, at least, as somebody, who's a newcomer, to California. I was 27 or so, and who had some aptitude for what he did. So that opened up a lot of doors for me to get work, and still does. It's still nice to be able to say, hey, I got a DGA award nomination, look at me, aren't I great?
And how long were you in China for, and how many hours of footage did you film for this documentary?
It was not very long at all. We were there, I think just for a couple of weeks. And it was a college choir, the college I had gone to, Centenary College, and it was kind of a sort of a cultural exchange program where they had been invited by the government to come and perform at like the Opera House in Beijing, to perform on national TV. And for many people, it was the first time that they had ever even heard Western music. So it was, in fact, there's a moment in the film where the choir director is telling the choir, now remember, no undue pressure here, but this is probably the first time most of these people have ever heard Western music. So whatever they think of it in the future is going to depend on you. That was kind of hilarious. But we didn't shoot tons of stuff. Rick, my partner in this project, we were both, were and are newsmen. And so we're used to just trying to shoot what you need. Don't overshoot, because you're not going to have time to edit all that stuff when you get back. Certainly that's the case for Deadline News. And I think we used a good deal of what we shot. So I don't remember how many hours we shot, but it was It was not that much. We were pretty conservative, and we kind of knew what we were going for, so it wasn't one of these documentaries where you just shoot and shoot and shoot and then come back and see what sticks to the wall. It was pretty obvious, the moments. And it was a very personal story, of these college kids meeting, and I was virtually a college kid at the time myself, meeting these Chinese and Chinese singers and people who were still living under communism, still are, and kind of the message of the whole story was that no matter how different people seem to be, when you get down to it, people are people. The same thing gives us joy, the same thing gives us pain and grief. And I didn't have any sort of Christian or evangelical bent to it. If I were to do that movie now, it would be very different in that respect. Mm-hmm. Centenary was a Methodist-based college, but there was no quite probably intentional evangelical component of what we were doing while we were over there. Should have been, in my opinion. I'm sure they had some strict restrictions, upon them, but it was not and is not an evangelical college at that time, nor is it today. So I'm not sure that would have been part of their mandate. But looking back on it, it was a relatively entertaining half-hour documentary. But the way I would approach that now would be quite different.
We're talking with filmmaker Jody Eldred. This is The Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. And next time, Jody discusses a program that was the predecessor to Entertainment Tonight, as well as getting to work with program executives Brandon Tartikoff and Grant Tinker.